officers, members of the public, delighted to welcome you to tonight's meeting of Strategic Infrastructure Committee, Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee here at Maidstone, being held as a Skype meeting and broadcast live this evening. The meeting is broadcast live and will be recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include a record of the instant messaging. May I ask, will anybody else be intending to record? And I'm not asking to prevent you, just so that others know it will be happening.
I reserve my right.
That is noted. So the way things will work tonight, my role as chairman will continue. However, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Mr. O'Connell. This officer will not steer the debate. They will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. A Democratic Services Officer, Ms. Parfitt, is also with us to produce the minutes and to provide procedural advice as required. And once again, I would remind members that instant messaging, which we will probably use, will be visible to all those viewing the meeting and must only be used by members to indicate their wish to speak. I'm going to ask the facilitator to take the attendance register by reading out the list of committee members who will confirm their attendance by answering present. Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor English.
Present.
Councillor Garton.
Present. Good evening.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Present.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Munford.
Present.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Present.
And Councillor de Wiggin Shepherd.
Present.
That's the attendance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I ask you also to read out a list of the officers presenting and those who are with us this evening?
Yes, I can do so. One of them that I was expecting isn't here yet. So, okay, so we have in attendance, we have the Head of Planning and Development, Rob Jarman, the Interim Local Plan Review Director, Philip Coyne, and the Planning Team Leader for Mid-Kent Legal, Russell Fitzpatrick. And then presenting reports or to help with the reports, we have Strategic Planning Manager Mark Edgerton, items 14 and 15, and the Housing Delivery Manager Andrew Connors as well to support item 14. And then we have the Planning Policy Officer, Mrs. Anna Ironmonger, for item 16. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. By virtue of the attendance register, agenda item 1, apologies, we have a full house, there are no apologies. Therefore, agenda item 2, there are no substitute members this evening. Agenda item 3 is the matter of urgent items, and we have some. There is an urgent item, and I make the distinction between item and update. We've been requested to consider an update from Mr. Jarman on a new building control out of hours dangerous structure call out service. It is unusual to accept an urgent item like this, but it is for information only, and the matter is current. So with your agreement, I believe that we should accept that for a very brief update item, which will actually become agenda item 17. As I stress, it's only for information only. There's no decision making. But if I can take your silence as agreement that that should be the case, or please object if you feel uncomfortable with that. There are two minor urgent updates to agendaed items as well. There is one in relation to item 14, which is a relatively small typographical update, and the officer will identify that when he delivers his report. And similarly, on agenda item 16, neighbourhood planning protocol updates, I believe that an amended appendices 1 has been circulated, and full explanation of that will be given at the appropriate time. So one additional item, two relatively minor but important updates. So as I'm happy to accept those as chair, but now is your moment to object if you wish to do so.
Sorry, David, could you just, what was the additional update in regards to the local plan review?
Neither for the local plan review. It's the neighbourhood planning protocol, agenda item 16, and a typographical on agenda item 14, which is the affordable housing item.
Sorry, I misheard. That's why I was a bit surprised.
That's better to be sure.
But I'm still just grappling with these headphones, so yes, I was probably a bit distracted.
Okay, very good. If we can move swiftly then to agenda item 4, visiting members. I have received notification from Councillor Mortimer, who would like to speak as visiting member on item 14. I don't believe there are any other members registered to speak. So moving on, item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members, please? Only speak if you have a disclosure. The silence confirms that there are no disclosures to be noted this evening. And we'll now turn to the matter of lobbying at agenda item 6. And for this, I'll ask the facilitator to ask us in alphabetical order if we've been lobbied on any item, and please confirm none or yes. And if it is yes, please specify the agenda item that you wish that to be noted against. Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Burton?
None.
Councillor Clark?
No.
Councillor English?
No.
Councillor Garton?
Not specifically. I think all of us have sooner or later been lobbied in a way regarding to item 15, but not specifically for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grigg?
None.
Councillor Mackay?
None.
Councillor Munford?
None.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed?
None.
Thank you. Councillor de Wiggenden-Shepherd?
None.
Thank you very much. That concludes the lobbying, Chairman.
Thank you. The formality at item 7 to consider if any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. We have no part 2 papers this evening, and I intend to take all items in public. If I can infer from your silence that you are in agreement with that, or if you have a concern, please indicate now. Right, everything in open session this evening. Agenda item 8, the minutes from our last meeting of the 9th of June 2020. They are circulated by the papers. I do have one matter to raise, but before I bring that in, does anybody else have any amendments that they would like to raise? I believe that indicates there's no amendments to the 9th of June meeting. The matter I want to raise is at that meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was having a connectivity issue. There is an error.
Okay.
Page 2, 147. It says reports of outside bodies, and then says there were no reports of outside bodies, and then gives the report I gave. Right,
we can amend that. That's a typographical there, isn't it?
When we get to item 13, I have a very brief but very good update on that I would like to speak to under item 13 very briefly.
Okay. All right, we'll consider that when we get to 13.
I think, Mr. Chairman, on that issue, there were no written reports, and you permitted Councillor English to give a short verbal update. I think that it was the correct procedure, if I remember.
Yeah, yes, that is what happened. There was, but I think that is noted. So it's another one of Councillor English's amendments that I need to refer to, which we took on board on the 9th of June meeting in connection with an amendment to the 10th of March meeting. Councillor English asked for amendment. Upon further checking, the amendment was not necessary as it had already been included in the minutes. So the amendment that you asked for has not been made. So it's just as a matter of protocol that I draw this to your attention and ask that it be minuted tonight that was the reason why the amendment wasn't made, because it was already contained.
Yeah, well, I'll have to take this up with you outside the meeting because I'm not convinced. But I'll accept that for the moment, Councillor.
Yeah, for the moment, if there's further information, but that's just for the record that amendment currently is not made, and I haven't signed them off yet either. So, so based upon that, then these minutes will be signed as a correct record at a later date. I'll assume that silence indicates agreement. Thank you. Item 9, there are no petitions on this occasion. Item 10, there are no questions from members of the public either. And item 11, you'll be pleased to know there are no questions to the chairman either.
I didn't hear any of that. It all just went completely fuzzy.
Did others hear that, or was it a localised?
I heard you very clearly, Mr. Chairman.
All clear here.
Loud and clear for me.
Thank you. If anybody has problems, please do shout like Councillor Parfitt-Reid just did, just in case it is a wider issue. Right, let's get stuck in next with item 12, the committee work programme. You'll find it on page 7. I'd invite comments, but the Vice Chair and I and myself have had a conversation about the work programme in relation to our request at a previous meeting to have an update specifically about the COVID impact on parking in the financial sense of the budgetary implications. And also where we've actually suspended certain regulations. It's not featuring in the work programme at the moment, and I'm putting it to you as the committee that we shouldn't wait until the first quarter budget performance monitoring to receive that, and that it actually is an important matter, and we're looking for your support to actually formalise the request more strongly that we are updated on matters concerning parking and COVID impact.
I would agree with that, Mr. Chairman. I think that specific issue, and I think there are other issues on parking we need to be updated about as well, but we might as well start there.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Grigg, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've summed it up there for the both of us.
So the committee is formally requesting that an update, a report for the next meeting to update us on the financial impact and the amendments to regulations and the suspension of any instructions previously given by this committee in the light of the COVID response.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good, thank you. Let's move on. The papers say there are no reports from outside.
Chairman,
yes.
Sorry, can I just clarify something? The next meeting of the committee will be in September, which is when the first quarter budget monitoring report is scheduled for. So do you want a separate report on it? Is that what you're asking for?
Well, that being the case, and thank you for pointing that out, yes, I think the breadth of what we've just set out will go beyond the quarterly budget and performance monitoring. because it does contain other aspects of where we are with regulation suspension and other delay of decisions previously made by this committee.
And potentially there could be quite a lot of points of departure on that. So it's not just a noting report, potentially. There could be outcomes. So it's rather vastly different than the monitoring report.
I mean, if I can be very specific on one point that I think it needs to include, this committee gave an instruction to make alterations to parking charges. That's not to say that all of us supported it. I believe that on officer delegated powers, that instruction is not currently carried out. And I'm not passing comment on whether that's good, bad, but I think it's right that the committee have full awareness of such matters.
Absolutely.
Okay, so is that the clarity that you required, Mr. O'Connell?
Yeah, we'll minute that so that we can be clear on what the report requires.
Yeah. Item 13, reports of outside bodies. The papers say there are none, but I suspect that Councillor English has a relevant update for us. So,
yeah, it's literally only just happened, Mr. Chairman, in the last few days. At the last committee meeting, I gave a verbal report that South Eastern have made new funding available for additional community rail partnerships. As a bid was made by the existing community rail partnership that runs the Medway Valley and Swale Line partnerships, that was mostly successful, and £150,000 was allocated to establish a new partnership between Kemsing and Charing running through Maidstone, and including all the stations within the borough on the Maidstone East Line. A full statement from South Eastern and from the CRP will be sent forward, and I anticipate it should be in a shape to put to your committee, to our next committee meeting, and it's quite good news.
Can I make a personal request to you then, as our representative on the community rail partnerships as they are currently? I was discussing this with others earlier. I previously had sat on aforesaid mentioned body, and being frank, didn't actually see the material benefit. I'm led to believe that perhaps since I was involved, and read into that as you will,
it wasn't your fault, Mr. Chairman.
It has been somewhat more productive, but it would be very useful to know some of the tangible actions and delivery to help convince cynics, as I find myself, as to the merits of all of these huge sums of money being made available to it, and the worthiness of our full participation.
Of course, Mr. Chairman, it's South Eastern money, of course, but it nevertheless needs to be spent appropriately and well, and I will take on board that and hopefully provide you with the right information.
Some material examples, that would be very useful. Thank you. Let's move on. We're into the main body of the meeting. So the committee reports. Just to remind us all that I will read out the agenda item. The relevant officer will present. That would be followed by a representative of any organisation that may have registered to speak. I don't think we have any of those this evening. And then that is followed by visiting members who've registered. After that, then I'll advise members that the debate is open and request you to indicate by the instant messenger as you wish to speak. We'll run through members speaking in the order, and please use the green telephone in the instant messaging wherever possible, but if you're not, if that's not available to you, please interject verbally so that I'm aware. I'll invite the officer to respond during the debate as seems appropriate, and after the list has been exhausted, I'll ask any members if they wish to come back for further, and then we would move to concluding the business with a motion, and I'm happy to receive notification of that through the instant messaging as well. I think it's pretty straightforward standard protocol, so let's get on, and we will start with Item 14, Maidstone Affordable and Local Needs Housing Supplementary Document. And I believe that's Mr. Edgerton this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Government guidance allows for the production of supplementary planning documents to build upon and provide more detail, advice or guidance on policies in an adopted local plan. As they do not form part of the Council's development plan, they cannot introduce new planning policies into the development plan. Policies SP19 and SP20 of Maidstone's adopted local plan refer to the production of an affordable and local needs housing supplementary planning document to expand on how the proposals contained in these policies will be implemented. Requirements associated with the production of a supplementary planning document are contained in government regulations. The Council also needs to comply with the requirements of its adopted Statement of Community Involvement. Consultancy Adams Integra was appointed to take forward the supplementary planning document, and pre-consultation engagement took place during drafting of the SPD. This involved developers and registered providers or housing associations, and a working group took place for council members. In accordance with the statutory requirements, a 6-week public consultation was then undertaken. Modifications have been made to the SPD as a result of both the pre-consultation engagement and the consultation itself. The SPD has various purposes, including to facilitate negotiations and provide certainty for landowners, lenders, house builders and registered providers regarding the Council's expectations for affordable and local needs housing provision in specific development schemes. This includes guidance on the range of approaches, standards and mechanisms required to deliver a range of housing to meet identified needs. As such, the SPD is intended to facilitate delivery of truly affordable homes in the borough, but within the parameters of adopted policy. Regarding the content of the SPD, a chapter-by-chapter summary is provided in the report. The matters that are covered include the national and local context, including the evidence for need. In this regard, I would refer members to paragraph 1.11 of the report, where it is noted that 67% of affordable housing need is for social and affordable rent tenures, whilst the remaining 33% of affordable housing need is for intermediate housing. The local requirements are also set out in the SPD itself, including the desire to bring forward truly affordable homes, with priority on the provision of social rent housing. Individual site requirements are also set out, including the desire not to lose affordable units when an occupier moves out. Specific requirements for housing for the elderly, including extra care, older persons and specialist housing, are set out. Transfer values are provided, and the presumption that provision of affordable housing should be on-site is also made clear. Another matter that is clarified is the approach to viability, including that paying too much for the land is not justification to underprovide affordable housing. The SPD has now reached the stage of being considered for adoption. The report asks that the content of the Affordable and Local Needs Housing Supplementary Planning Document and associated consultation statements are noted, and the Affordable and Local Needs Housing Supplementary Planning Document is adopted for use in decision making. Should members agree to this recommendation, the SPD and an associated adoption statement will be published. As noted by the Chairman, there is a minor amendment required to the SPD. This is paragraph 2.9, which is in Appendix 1, the SPD itself, and it refers to 2015 rather than what it should refer to, which is 2011, and it's our intention to amend this accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your introduction. I'm going to invite Councillor Mortimer to speak as visiting member next, and I believe he's doing that in capacity as chairman of CHE committee. And obviously there is overlapping responsibility between our portfolio and the portfolio of that committee. So, Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And good evening, everybody. As David said, Chair of the CHE Committee, I personally fully support the SPD as it would better assist our committee with its priorities going forward. It's a very comprehensive SPD and fits well with the local plan policies. There has been community involvement, a very helpful workshop, our consultants' input and public consultation. It sets out expectations on our developers to provide truly affordable homes. It has been fully evidenced, so we have a catch-all approach. A major point for me is the priority to have truly social rent delivery. Another point is the proposed dispersal approach as opposed to the clustering of social housing on numerous sites. I'm pleased that the off-site provision element is not encouraged and included in this policy. The need for this SPD is obvious, and it will benefit many of our residents and their needs across the borough. I'm glad we are not waiting for the local plan review to complete and taking this step now. It's the priorities and aspirations of the council, and I know many members. It recognises the real world and goes some way to challenging the housing crisis we all find ourselves in. However, I do wonder if we need to set targets for monitoring purposes. As I said, it recognises the real world out there, and perhaps it's more important with the economic knock-on effects of the pandemic we're experiencing. I sincerely hope all members support the SPD this evening, as it gives our officers and our planning committee the tools to promote truly social and affordable new homes across Maidstone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got 3 indications thus far. Councillor English, Councillor Parfitt-Reid and Councillor Clark. So, Councillor English, you're first. You're muted, I believe.
Sorry about that, force of habit. When you're chairing a committee, you don't sort of go on mute. Right, the members of committee may have seen the fairly late but nevertheless important letter from Councillor Mackay, which I'm sure he's going to refer to in a moment. So I won't go into that in detail, except to say, but I share his objectives, although there may be other ways of achieving the accessibility standards that he was referring to, rather than going for a 10% figure, which I think may be, given the direction of travel of government policy, the local plan and other documents, to aim rather artificially low. So I think that we need to embrace the sentiment, but perhaps approach that in a slightly different way. I'm conscious that we obviously do need, as Councillor Mortimer said, to get on and adopt this rather important tool to amplify our existing local plan policies. And but I think we do need to have a process whereby that a couple of revisions are taken on board, which I hope that the chairman and officers will address later, in particular in relation to delivering the accessibility standards that we would like to see. More generally, I think this is a very welcome document. We have had a number of occasions where developers have not, for one reason or another, sometimes justifiably, other times not failed to deliver on-site social housing or affordable housing of any type, or even in some cases off-site provision. So this is a welcome step forward. Obviously, we can't cover everything in an SPD because some things require new policy rather than guidance, but it is a start, and I do believe that, subject to having a procedure to undertake a few revisions, because, for example, there are some technical issues around 106s in the report as well that need to be taken forward. I think that's all for the moment, Mr. Chairman, members, officers.
Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Marvellous.
Oh, well, you're frozen now.
Our report and very much welcomed. Some of the things that, for me, I think.
Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, I'm sorry, we are having some. Can I suggest, in the first instance, try just switching off the video and see if we can concentrate the bandwidth.
I have done that.
Right, it's done.
I have done that. Can you hear me now? Right.
Yes.
Yes. Where was I? I was just saying, one of the things that I really welcomed is was the issue over dispersal as opposed to clustering in developments, because it's an argument I've had with developers on a number of occasions, and I've always been sort of voted down on it by developers. So I'm glad to see that was in there. The other thing is I didn't receive Mr. Malcolm Mackay's wonderful email. I've just checked and I haven't received that, so I can't comment on that. But what concerns me about this, or the worry I have, is how will the current economic climate and the situation with COVID affect this report or affect this situation? Because obviously the report has been based on what is the norm as opposed to what we might be experiencing in the future. And I just wondered if somebody could make a comment about that.
Has an officer got a response specifically on that for now?
Thank you, Chairman. It's Mark Edgerton here. I'll start with a response. Thank you, Councillor Parfitt-Reid. The purpose of a supplementary planning document is not to add any additional financial burden beyond existing policy. So this SPD has been produced with that in mind, and that is a national requirement. So from a COVID-19 perspective, we would still be applying our policy requirements within that context, and this SPD provides guidance only and provides no additional financial burden to developers or registered providers. Thank you.
Yeah, that wasn't actually, I suppose, my concern. I suppose what my concern was that the evidence is based around a certain amount of affordable housing being required, and I'm just worried that going forward our needs may be greater than what has been evidenced in this report, if you understand what I'm saying.
That's a very fair point.
May I respond, Chairman?
Please do.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And I think it is an important point, and it is one which cannot be addressed through a supplementary planning document. The proportion of affordable housing itself is something which is set in policy. It's set out in policy SP20 of the adopted local plan, and this SPD cannot change those requirements. The way to change those policy requirements and the amount and type of affordable housing overall is through revision and review of the adopted local plan. And so what we will need to do as officers working with members is to ensure that we have correct evidence to ensure that future policies contained in the local plan review have regard to the emerging situation, and it is an emerging situation in respect of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We will be commissioning specialist studies, particularly around viability. We will also be looking at a new strategic housing market assessment to look at the way that need is being affected in terms of the latest picture. We may need to do an update on that as we understand more about the COVID-19 pandemic. So those studies will come together and they will help us formulate new policy. Thank you.
And I think I'm right in saying that will be in the non-spatial section of our plan making, which we'll enter into in the new year. Can you just confirm that, Mr. Edgerton?
Thank you, Chairman. That's confirmed.
Excellent. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I do welcome this report. I think the debate that we had getting to this point shows that we probably did need to sharpen up our policy, and this type of SPD certainly gives guidance when we're in planning committee meetings and we're trying to work out whether something should be done one way or another. So I certainly welcome it. I do take the point that targets are key, and we do need to make sure that we sort of adhere to what we say we're striving to achieve. But ultimately, I do welcome it, and I do also want to make note of the consultation statement, which I went through this because I've made a number of points earlier in the consultation process, and I thought this was an excellent document to actually go through and see the individual points raised by consultees and very thorough comment, and in some cases you can actually see the points which are accepted and the rationale behind not accepting points. So I do welcome that form of consultation statement.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grigg.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I too agree. This is a very good SPD, and it's certainly going to help us do the job. It's a very positive story. We're getting local homes for local people. But I have just got one point of clarification. I don't know if Mr Edgerton can answer this. On page 44, 11.4, the approved list of registered providers, Maidstone Borough Council is actually listed first as owners of stock. And is that right, Mark? Because I understood that Golden Homes hold our stock. So why is Maidstone Borough Council at the top of that list?
Thank you very much indeed. I would like Andrew Connors to respond to that, if that's okay, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good.
Hello there. Thanks, Mark. Hello, Chairman. Hello, everybody. Yeah, the list of you're quite right to point out the list of the registered providers there are in order of stock. MBC does have some stock ourselves, but relatively kind of like small. That's a slight error within the document itself. We can obviously move MBC down into the proper order of stock level that we have that's appropriate there within the actual document.
Thank you. I think as these papers can go public, that's a good idea.
Yeah, very good. Councillor Mackay.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Most of you, and I do apologise, Lottie, for not sending you the email. I sent an email earlier on, and can I just use instant messages to paste for those that haven't seen it, some of it? Yeah. A paragraph.
Can I take guidance from facilitator whether we're allowed to do that, because that's actually circulating material that isn't necessarily available as part of the minutes.
Yeah, so I'd suggest you need to consider it yourself, Chairman, as to whether you want to take it in much the same way as you had done with the earlier urgent updates and changes to things, but also using the IM to paste things doesn't always work very well. So
it may not be available to everyone.
Shall I read it out then?
Yeah. Read it out, and I have a suggestion of a way forwards here. But read out your email, and then we're all cited on it.
This is mainly for Lottie, really, because everybody should had the opportunity to see it. Yeah. And I do apologise for the lateness of this coming forward, but this was something as a group we had discussed, and Keith Atkinson was asked to go away and look at it. This was, and the subject was access for the disabled people in housing. And he only replied this afternoon. Then I realised, of course, this related to something on our agenda tonight. So in London, for instance, 10% of all housing, not just local authority housing, is to be made accessible for wheelchair users. So as we were discussing affordable housing tonight, I thought, well, why shouldn't we include this and set a target for affordable housing to be wheelchair accessible? In conversations prior to this meeting, I realised how little I understood of this subject and how wise some of my colleagues, and particularly the chair and Councillor English, were on this. So may I hand over to you, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. So this is parallel to one of the other things that was in the original draft, where we set originally out to specify minimum room standards, for example, for affordable housing. And the point was well made by members that if it's good enough for affordable housing, it should be good enough for private sector housing too. Therefore, I think the way forwards on that is that we will pursue minimum room size standards as an overarching document that will apply to everything. And I think that possibly the same approach is the one that we need to address this matter. And indeed, as Councillor English said to us earlier, 10% may not be enough. So Mr. Edgerton, can you confirm that any policies such as room sizes or disabled access that we actually have as non-spatial policies would have an overarching bearing on affordable as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that is my understanding, and I would also confirm that we will need to. I want to steer members away from the potential of adding extra financial burdens through this SPD and potentially going into the realms of creating new policy through this SPD, neither of which is appropriate for this document. Thank you.
So, I think we should note the concerns that are raised about suitability for disabled occupants, but my suggestion to the committee is that we pursue that with non-spatial policies that have an overarching play. If it's good enough for affordable housing, it should be good enough for the private sector too. I invite responses on that subject. Perhaps before members come back, I see Mr. Jarman wants to add to this, and also Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Jarman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarity, really, from either your good self or Councillor Mackay or Councillor English. In terms of the 10% or whatever percentage accessibility standard for persons with disabilities, is that beyond the building regulations? Because there's very clear building regulations on this matter. So would this be Maidstone's extra accessibility?
So if I could just respond to that in the short term, I think we have to consider that matter in the whole as that possibility across all housing delivery, and that's a deep discussion for another day.
Yes.
But it would be wrong to just get something exceptional into this policy that hasn't had the due consideration. Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you want to jump in before we go back to Councillor English?
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse what Mark has said, obviously we can't be introducing a policy here like the 10% target, and I think we understand that now. Obviously, the way wheelchairs are presently assessed is on a case-by-case basis, depending what's on our housing need register. I certainly know that when we do the Section 106 agreements, where we introduce the building regs provisions, which Rob is, I think, is referring to, that is assessed as part of the planning application, depending on what our housing needs register requires. Perhaps Andrew Connors can probably fill in a little bit more detail as to the practical application of that, if that would assist you.
I think that could be useful, Mr. Connors.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as Russell says, we do have a provision in the Section 106 that deals with Part M4.2 accessible adaptable standards for affordable units, and M4.3 fully wheelchair accessible. In terms of applying a 10% or whatever percentage it may be, a kind of blanket policy across all affordable units across all sites, I would have a great concern with that, purely because the need on the register does not justify such an approach. We just don't have the need on the register. It's relatively small for fully wheelchair accessible kind of applicants. So that's why it's kind of looked at on a site-by-site basis. But through the SPD and through the Section 106 agreements and through pre-app discussions, etc., we do encourage all developers to come forward to actually build all affordable units to M4.2, which is the accessible adaptable standard, so they can be adapted at some point later on down the line if they need to be.
Before I go to Councillor English, and he's patiently indicating, Councillor Mackay, are you fairly content with how this is being addressed at the moment?
I can understand what you're saying, that the way to approach this is not via this document here, but by getting a change to the standards, policies, because there is a cost, clearly. Regarding your point that that we need to adopt standards across the piece, not just for social housing, but for private. I would say on that, David, that we are in a position to set the standards on social housing, and I think we should do that. As I understand it, if we try to set the same standards in private, we've got to go through the process of evidencing it. So, I think if you can do something now, do it, but by all means follow it up with the private. But
I think we need to apply the same level of evidence to anything that we would do here, and the necessary consultation for that as well. But I was just wondering whether what Mr. Connors had just told us, I was quite heartened by the way he was describing that this is actually currently taken into account directly in relation to the need that's identified by the register anyway.
I don't see that at all, really. I think this is about houses for life, and any of us have got older relatives know that there's lots of people that not even registered disabled that need wheelchair access to their homes. I mean, I've got a mother-in-law that is certainly not registered disabled, but she's 85, and to get her about, and she needs a wheelchair, but she can't get a wheelchair inside her house. It has to be unfolded. That applies to a huge amount of people. That is very common, and as we get older, more and more of us need those aids. That doesn't make us a registered disabled person. And it is not. So I think we're underplaying what is needed, and 10%, I think, is a small number to ask for. I think it probably. Look, I'm pleased that we put it on the agenda, and we need to talk about this more. I think Clive has got a lot more to say on this and knows a lot more about the subject than I do. So,
shall I bring Clive in next? Yeah. Clive. Councillor English, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, little connectivity problem. It's solved now, I think. I understand Mr. Connors is correctly applying the current situation, but I think he's fundamentally wrong from a local planning point of view as how it should be addressed. If one is adopting a standard for all housing, you don't really need to get into the issue of the housing register, because it's a standard for all housing. It's a planning policy standard and not a housing needs standard. However, the work needs to be done, but and we are not in a position to bring that forward now, but we do need to bring it forward now, and not on the restricted basis of an artificially low figure of 10% or an artificially case-by-case basis. I actually think the existing SPD would be a lot better if the case-by-case basis paragraph was omitted, because it basically means the SPD in relation to that aspect has no effect. But we may not be able to do that at this point, on that precise point. But on the general point, we need to have account of the fact that the population in this country is aging, and that this is not just a general need for disabled people, but it is a need for our increasingly aging population. And it will be, and the more enlightened housing developers are already talking about this being a standard across the board, across the country. I've been to 4 seminars on this subject in the last 8 months. Including at the Mercure Hotel recently, which Mark Edgerton knows about. The fact is that I would like to see a reference, just to pick this up so it's formally recorded, that we actually wish to see these issues, without saying what the resolution of these particular issues on accessibility be picked up in work on general housing, not on affordable housing, but across the board housing as we go forward with the local plan. Just a reference so that we've formally recorded the problem, but not what we're mandating as the solution.
Right. So let me suggest that we make a separate resolution to capture that.
Yes.
To move us on from the chair, I'm going to move the adoption as per the papers and noting the consultation statement 2, with the amendment to the correction on the dates for the delivery of rural exception sites, and with the correction of the placing of MBC in the ownership list of housing stock. And I'll move that from the chair and invite a seconder.
Seconded, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor English. Are you content that I move to the vote straight away, Councillor English?
On that particular resolution, right. Yes.
I'll ask the officer to take the vote, and he will call out your name and ask you for your voting intention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Burton?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor English?
4.
Councillor Garton?
4.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg?
4.
Councillor Mackay?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid? Councillor Parfitt-Reid? I'll move on and come back. Councillor de Wigadeen-Shepherd?
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, Councillor Parfitt-Reid. Which way?
Yes. Sorry, I lost you.
No problem. Which way is your vote going?
I didn't hear the motion. I'm sorry. I got kicked out.
Can I repeat the motion for Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid? It is to adopt the policy and note the consultation as per the papers, with the 2 amendments that we've identified. I moved that and Councillor English seconded.
Yes, 4. Sorry, I just wanted to be 100%.
No, that's good.
Okay, that concludes the voting, Chairman.
Can you confirm the result, please?
Chairman, that was unanimously 4.
Therefore, that motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor English, would you like to succinctly indicate a further motion that the committee might support with regard to the further work?
Yes, that as part of the emerging work on our overall housing strategy, that too much work in that sentence. As part of our ongoing emerging housing strategy, we undertake work to ensure that the issues of accessibility and appropriateness of a house of a home for a lifetime living be assessed within the general housing issue.
And I'm very happy to second you on that.
I'm sure the grammar can be tidied up, but you know roughly what I'm saying.
I've said that I'll second you. I'm not sure whether Councillor Mrs. Grigg beat me to it, whether it related to that.
I'm happy to second. It was actually you
right, okay.
Seconding, but
right,
I'm happy
I'm seconding. So if we could immediately go to a vote, and again, Mr. O'Connell, if you would conduct the process for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Burton?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor English?
4.
Councillor Garton?
4.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg?
4.
Councillor Mackay?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid? Councillor Parfitt-Reid? Councillor de Wigadeen-Shepherd?
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid, can you hear me?
I can now, but sorry, I was at it. I got kicked out again. I've only just got back in.
Okay. Did you hear the motion for the second vote?
No, I didn't. I'm really sorry.
It's a motion relating to further work on the issue of accessibility and for lifetime occupation. That we are requesting further work to be conducted.
Okay, 4.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the voting.
Excellent.
Can we confirm the result, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That was unanimously 4.
And therefore is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. I think that was good contributions from everybody, and actually it's meaningful work that we're actually doing here. Let's move on.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll just point out that I'm not having quite the same problems, many problems as Councillor Parfitt-Reid, but the system has also turfed me out once, and now is keeping asking me for passwords to stay in. So I'm looking like having the same problems.
Can we leave that in the capable hands of our IT support this evening?
Just so that you know that this is what's going on with it. That's all.
Yeah. No. I think we need to note that, and IT aren't naturally aware. Thank you. Let's move on. Agenda item 15, local plan review update. Again, Mr. Edgerton to start us off.
Thank you very much, Chairman. At the 10th of March 2020 meeting of this committee, members resolved that officers provide a short written update at each meeting of this committee concerning any slippage and or progress on delivering the local plan review on the timescale agreed. This report provides the requested update. Maidstone Borough Council, in its role as local planning authority, is still on course to undertake a public consultation on its preferred approaches to addressing the key areas of growth in the borough in October 2020. This includes housing, employment and retail growth, as well as other matters that influence the amount and location of growth in the borough. A reminder also that there is a further scheduled public consultation that will address remaining growth-related issues, as well as preferred approaches on more detailed policy areas, such as the one we just discussed, in February 2021. This month's report provides members with a summary of the key specialist evidence studies that will help inform the forthcoming member engagement exercises and the October 2020 public consultation. The report notes in paragraph 1.5 that many studies will also inform other components of the local plan review, including the public consultation that is due to take place in February next year. The main areas of specialist evidence that are considered in this report are the Economic Development Needs Study, Strategic Flood Risk Assessment, Sustainability Appraisal and Strategic Environmental Assessment, Strategic Land Availability Assessment, Garden Communities Assessment, Maidstone Transport and Air Quality Modelling Project, the Integrated Transport Strategy, a Gypsy and Traveller and Travelling Show People Accommodation Assessment, a Sports Facilities Strategy and Playing Pitch Strategy, and a Heritage Strategy. Further information regarding each specialist study is provided within the report. Finally, the report notes that there are other considerations that will feed into the summer member engagement exercise and the October 2020 public consultation. The role of the topic papers to bring together various relevant matters is noted in paragraph 1.33. And a reminder that the recommendation to the committee is that the report is noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't have any indications at the moment, so that being the case, I will start. I just would like to ask you about one very specific thing in terms of timing. The strategic flood risk assessment. Do we know when the first draft of that will be in? Mr. Edgerton, perhaps?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're anticipating getting a draft of that in fairly shortly, actually. We're hoping that it will help inform initial discussions with members in the member engagement exercise. So we are hoping to get that information in this month so that it can inform that's the start of that work. Thank you.
That's excellent. So more generally, when I was musing this report, reading it, it struck me that last local plan process, we actually went through a process of receiving these reports as evidence, and we actually had a process to accept them into the evidence base. And that was, of course, the opportunity for all of us to be aware of their content to scrutinise the credibility of the sources and to formally recognise it into the public domain. The trajectory that we're on at the moment it isn't identifying when that will take place. So, you know, I am concerned that we need to have that process in place. Perhaps I'll bring Councillor Parfitt-Reid in next, as she's indicated, and we can find a way forwards with this.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was a bit slow on there. I got kicked out again. Yes, you sort of really started to raise the question that I wanted to raise, which was when these meetings over the summer are likely to take place, where we can scrutinise this evidence. That was my question.
Mr. Edgerton, would you want to come in on this, or Mr. Coyne's co-presenting this as well, if either of you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, so we will be sending out the dates. The member engagement programme was agreed at that committee previously, but essentially we have two SPY workshops, one in August, one in early September, and in between that we will be having an all-member session probably in the second week in August. So that will be some forums where we will talk to members about how the evidence base is looking and how the evidence base will influence the options for the spatial strategy that the options for a spatial strategy that we'll be talking to members about. In terms of sort of bringing all that together, would an idea be, Chair, that we use the LPR update report in September to actually bring a report which summarises sort of what we have in the evidence bases and how they're contributing to what we will be bringing to committee in October?
It looks to me like that might be the earliest opportunity that we could formally bring this evidence. So, you know, if that were to come in the format of a summary, perhaps like you suggest, with reference to the actual reports where they're available as appendices or signposted as publication on the website, and that would be the formal opportunity that we bring this into the public domain, because I think it's vitally important that the context of consideration that we will ultimately be asked to make decisions against is delivered to public scrutiny as well.
Can I just say something to that? I mean, I think it is vital that public scrutiny is seen to be happening here, and or the public have the ability to do that, because, you know, there's so much. I mean, I know we're talking about rumours and conjecture and all of that kind of thing, but there is a lot of distrust within the community over this local plan review. And, you know, already, I mean, I've spoken to somebody today who has said that the parishes have been given tip-offs of things that haven't you know, that sites that won't be going into this local plan review. And I was always under the understanding that no sites could be taken out until it was all in the public domain. And I just think it's really important that the public see a process being followed, and it's a logical process.
Councillor English, can I pick your comment up or take that as an indication that you're wishing to speak?
I thought I also did indicate that I wish to speak, but for some reason that hasn't come through. Odd. I think it's important that even if we don't all read every single page of the evidence documents, we are able, whether it's on the housing allocations themselves or other evidence papers, to actually be able to turn around to our constituents and say, yes, we had the opportunity to read the evidence. whilst I have absolutely no doubt in my own mind that the summary documents prepared by Mr. Edgerton and his staff and by Mr. Coyne will be and exemplars of fairness and elegance of prose, the like of which we have seldom seen in any other local plan review in the country, I don't feel that I can turn around to my constituents and say, well, did you read anything other than the summary? I need to be able to say, I actually saw or had the opportunity to see certain key pieces of evidence for myself.
And that we should formally accept those into the
because if I am asked by whoever, the Downs Mail or a random resident, were you able to see those documents, and I have to turn around and say no, the whole, the reputational damage to the council, councillors, the whole process will be tremendous. We'll lose any public support we ever had any chance of gaining for the park plan.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg, you're next, and then Councillor Clark.
It's really just to clear things in my own mind. I just want to make sure I understand properly. Philip, are you saying that what will happen is that as you get the information, you'll release it to us through member engagement in August and September for us to properly debate, properly consider, properly influence the document, and then everything will be released to the public in October for them to have the transparency and see what's available and have a chance to comment?
I think that's what we're saying, Councillor Grigg. Yeah, that we will discuss that with members as we do the engagement session. We will bring the report in September, which sort of summarises where we've got to with the evidence base and some of the directions it's pointing us in recommending a spatial strategy in the October. And then we've said previously that we would then release everything in October. So I suppose the point is here, we will do that in September. Are members happy then for that to be released in October when it's been accepted by members at the October meeting?
I think we have to consider that we as ward members are representatives of those areas, and if we are happy after having the opportunity, I think it's important that members have the opportunity to influence what's happening. And if we then are happy as ward members, then as far as I'm concerned, it makes perfect sense to release it all in October and then have a public consultation, knowing that as ward members we've represented our residents correctly.
Councillor Clark, I will bring you in, but that's very different to what I was understanding we were going to do. My my suggestion was that we would actually formally receive the evidence in public in September ahead of decision making in public.
Okay, sorry, Chair, I misunderstood that. I mean, if we want to do it, if members want to do it that way, we can bring the summary report in September. We can then make the evidence base available, and then that will have been available for people to be signposted to, and then that process of the evidence base being accepted in October can go ahead. Or would you look to be accepting that in September?
Or I was thinking we would be accepting it or otherwise in September.
Does that give us enough time for member engagement, Chairman?
Well, there's member engagement in the run up to that, and I hope that will help deepen our understanding of what the evidence is. But there's no good us doing it all behind closed doors. There has to come a point, and to do it on the night when we're going to be asked to, look at preferred options, it's too much. We've got to have due process in the public gaze. That here's the evidence. Are we reasonably content that it's complete and that we have understanding and release the evidence, and then have a period of time before we're then faced with so what's your decision? Councillor Clark, I think you should come in.
Yes, I mean, my feeling is, and I think we're all having the same thoughts, and we were having the thoughts coming into this meeting. We've got this time frame for Reg 18 in October, the end of October. on the previous local plan, we didn't just have engagement with members. We actually had public meetings where members were able to debate the evidence that led up to release of Regulation 18. My real fear that I have, especially when I hear sort of member engagement sessions, is that we will be almost briefed on what's going to happen, and then it will go out to the public in the end of October, and we'll be giving our feedback as members at the same time as the public. Now, yeah. What I really would like to see, and I realise the window's closing, but I would almost like there to be a public element with these engagement sessions, because I think if we make decisions in what are almost like briefings, then the public can say to us, well, you've made these decisions behind closed doors, even if we come back to it in September. So that's my real concern. I think we're almost trying to work with this time frame, which is closing. And there are certain things that I would like to see happen, which is members debating the merits of the evidence in a public forum prior to going out to Regulation 18, because at that point we're very constrained.
So I think, Councillor Clark, it seems to me that the only opportunity we have to do that in any shape or form is September.
Yeah.
And I would agree that, previously we had much more elongation of this part of the task. But like it or not, and I don't like it, the 5-year time frame for local plan review, I've become increasingly convinced isn't long enough to do proper justice to every stage. But if we don't meet the timeline, we lose control of planning in Maidstone, period.
I do agree with you, and I do also agree that even though it isn't ideal, we do need to have that discussion in September. It's paramount that we have it in September.
Yes. Who have we got next? I'm losing track here. Councillor de Wigandon, you haven't spoken on this yet.
I was simply saying that yes, that I agreed with you that we actually do have to have an opportunity to consider this and to agree it and to adopt it ourselves. And my concern was also that we would get this as some kind of briefing. And as far as Councillor English was saying, we could be giving, I was Councillor English, giving our comments back at the same time as residents. But you'd be in a position where, as members of this committee involved with this, we could have members dissenting quite strongly with what's been given out. So the council will be providing this as evidence, and you'd have members of this committee dissenting and say we simply don't agree with it at all.
That would be very possible.
I think it would be fair for me as chair to summarise that the will of the committee is that we have a September item where we have a summary of the evidence, and the actual evidence comes into the public domain by way of appendices or signposted to where it's published on our local plan review website. Do we need to make that a formal resolution, or are we content that the chair and vice chair will work with officers to make sure that happens in the work programme?
I do think, Mr. Chairman, the documents, I know it's a lot of paperwork, but the evidence at every other previous local plan review has actually been on the committee papers. I don't like signposting it to somewhere else on the web page.
I agree.
As well, Chairman, I don't think August is going to be as busy this year as it has been in past years. Maybe we can put some extra dates in.
I am mindful of the time constraints and the workload of officers, and I have discussed this with them prior to the meeting, and I did become convinced that September is realistically the earliest point that it could be done and be done well. And members will receive briefing during August and early September, so that we've got a more extensive understanding of the matter when we do actually bring it forward in public in September. So my suggestion to us all is that it's the the least best worst working compromise, given the timescale that is thrust and placed upon us.
Chair, I apologise, Chair. I missed Councillor English's remarks there. It cut out for a moment, but yeah, we've established the engagement programme with a view to try and make that as meaningful and as informative and as useful to members as we possibly can. And I do share that concern from the officer viewpoint that the more stages we introduce into that, the sort of that impedes our ability to really achieve what we want to achieve. And that's in making sure that members are completely sighted on all the aspects of it.
Okay.
Can I come back just briefly, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm going to let Councillor de Wiggenden, because he's put 3 green phones in a row and he got there before you. So let him come
No, that's
first.
fair enough. Fair enough.
See, this is exactly the point we've been talking about, Mr. Coyne.
I don't want any engagement exercise.
We're not looking for an engagement programme. We're looking for an approval programme.
Yes.
That's exactly the point.
Exactly.
So I think, as suggested, we've got both.
I don't think to be honest, Mr. Chairman, if there's a clash of issues, I'd rather have 2 committee meetings in September and no engagement meetings. Engagement meetings are a way of ruining this council's reputation because they take place in private. And in effect, decisions are made at those meetings which should be made in public,
no,
transparently.
They're not, English. We don't make decisions in those meetings.
Well, that's what happened with the last local plan review. But there you go.
No, it didn't. No.
I don't think. If it's a clash, Mr. Chairman, we need to, and we can't do both. Then we need more transparent meetings and less engagement meetings.
So how about this then? That we have already consented to the member engagement programme. We did that at the last meeting.
I know.
We are flagging very seriously that we want a formal element to the evidence base, which would come at our September meeting. I don't think it would be inappropriate to put a reserve date, an adjourned date behind that.
Fair enough.
So that there is some capacity. If it becomes elongated, I hope that it won't, because it's just about getting the evidence into the public forum and being seen to be doing that. But that would be how I would suggest that we could deal with it if we needed to.
Okay.
I don't think that we need to take this to a formal vote. I think the will of the committee is very clear, and the vice chair and myself can work with officers to ensure that this is delivered at the September meeting. Do we need to add to that? Everybody content?
Content, Mr. Chairman.
Does Rob Jarman want to come in, Chairman?
Yes, I've seen that one now. You've pointed it out to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Grigg. Yeah, can I just be clear? And I think I am clear because Councillor de Wiggenden summed it up. Councillors are seeking that we report the evidence base thus far for approval in September.
The process last time was that we accepted, we actually had as resolution on the reports to accept the evidence into the database. I remember it clearly.
Yes.
And that process, I believe, needs to happen on this occasion too. I think we're on a very compressed time scale. We'll receive a lot in one go, but nonetheless, it will be formally taken into the evidence database and essentially becomes public at that point.
So is it mainly communication of the evidence base in full?
I think it's this overarching principle that Councillor English and others have referred to, that this needs to be played out in public so that public can see the transparency of the matter. We could be trusted to do it the other way, but I don't think it's right that we should do it entirely in private engagement sessions, and we need to, be seen to be doing it in the gaze of public scrutiny.
Okay, understood.
To conclude this agenda item, we're just asked to note the report. I think the will of the committee has been clearly expressed on the next stage, which will be in the September meeting by the sounds of it. We're asked to note, I'll take silence at this time to indicate that we've agreed to note the report as presented. That is therefore noted, and the Vice Chair and myself will work with the agenda setting to ensure that the committee's will is presented. I think that concludes that item. In which case, we're at item 16, the neighbourhood planning protocol update, and I think Mrs. Ironmonger is going to lead us through this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just give you a bit of an update then. The revised neighbourhood planning protocol was approved in July 2018, and the update presented this evening comes as a result of several changes to the council's practices for processing neighbourhood plans, but it's also to provide clarity of actions at certain stages of the plan preparation. And reference has been made at the beginning of the protocol to the fact that it must comply with the Statement of Community Involvement Addendum, which was presented to this committee last month. The addendum is a response to government guidance on neighbourhood planning processes due to the coronavirus pandemic. The main impact on the protocol will be the availability of material at inspection points. The changes included in the SCI addendum have been embodied in the protocol by a reference at the top of the protocol, but not throughout. The reason is to provide flexibility and to avoid any additional changes at a later date. I'd like to draw members' attention to the urgent update, which was circulated ahead of the meeting, which affects the protocol at Regulation 17A, which is found at Appendix 1. In the outcome column, there is a section which reads, note, following a decision to move a plan to referendum, and then it continues. It is that section there in red that should be removed. The reason for this is to provide clarity that the post-examination plan is the outcome of the examiner's report, not a decision by SPI. You'll be able to see it on your screen now, the outcome column, just the removal of that red text there. At paragraph 1.13, the report indicates that the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan is at examination. We've now received the examiner's report on the 30th of June, which recommends that the plan move to referendum subject to modification. Now that we've received that examiner's report, the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan is a material consideration, and a report will be presented to this committee in September for the formal decision on what action to take, i.e. to proceed to referendum. After an SPI decision to move for referendum, the neighbourhood plan will be significant material consideration. This evening, committee are asked to approve the updated neighbourhood plan protocol with the amendment that you see in front of you. Thank you.
No one's indicating, so I'll ask a couple of questions if I may. Can you confirm, Mrs. Ironmonger, that actually this is compulsory upon us, that the examiner's positive report on a neighbourhood plan means that it is material at that point, that is compulsory upon us?
Yes, so it's outlined in the regulations that we have a duty to make that decision after receiving the examiner's report. It's within 5 weeks unless agreed with the parish council, which we've done.
So it's not compulsory then that it's automatic after the examiner's report, which is what our amended protocol will say. It's only if we make a decision. to accept it. Is that what you're saying? Because I'm getting confused by this. Forgive me.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Mark Edgerton here. The version of the Appendix 1, the Neighbourhood Planning Protocol in regard to Regulatory 17A, made it clear that we would need to turn this into with full and be a draft plan. That is not the case. The regulatory requirements mean that following the positive examiner's report, which is the case, for example, with the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan, then it is part of the formal plan and carries material weight. It's only additional signals gained from the decision by this committee to allow movement to the referendum.
So what I just want to be crystal clear on, that the government regulation makes that a compulsory outcome, and there's nothing that we can do that changes that. And I'm not suggesting that we do change it, but I just want it to be crystal clear that, you know, that's a fact of the guidance, the legislation now, rather than an adoption of this protocol.
That is correct.
Okay. So I can't help but make the observation that I understand the necessity for it, and I'm not against it, but it does make a complete mockery of the whole process of referendum, because if when it does go to referendum the people said no, you know, they were actually in the interim faced with a material consideration that they didn't support, which completely undermines the whole neighbourhood planning principle. But that's a comment, not a question. My more meaningful question, therefore, is going to be, when we approved the amendment to the Statement of Community Involvement, the committee made it very clear that this would be temporary for the duration of the necessity of the situation. Is this a more permanent change, or will it be reversed once business is normal, whatever the new normal will be?
Thank you, Chairman. The intention of this protocol is for this to be a permanent change that at this stage has regard to the Statement of Community Involvement addendum and the addendum associated with it. I apologise. So in effect, this protocol
I am having difficulty
will carry on
hearing
now
Mr.
until it is
Edgerton.
formally updated again. We felt it appropriate as officers to have regard to the addendum and awareness. Sincere apologies, Councillor. Chairman.
Is it just me having difficulty, or other members
I
as
can't
well?
hear that. I can't hear that, Chairman.
We are having difficulty in receiving your words, Mr. Edgerton.
Everybody hear me?
No, you have mutated into a Dalek. I'm sorry.
Yeah, can't hear a word, Mark.
I thought, right, I see that we're getting some confirmation in the IM. So the addendum is temporary. I assume that refers to the Statement of Community Involvement. The protocol is permanent. But you see, I find a nonsense in this, because a neighbourhood plan gets approved by referendum.
Yes.
And we're effectively saying it's made without the referendum. And a referendum can only unravel it, not make it. So I don't think it's necessarily the fault of our officers in devising this protocol, but I think it's fundamentally flawed what is in front of us. Sharper minds might see an error in my thinking, but
I can't see one, I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman.
Does Russell Fitzpatrick want to tell us more?
yeah, that would be useful.
Sorry,
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
I was just looking, when the question was first posed, I just wanted to double check. I'm just looking at the NPPG. It just says a neighbourhood plan attains the same legal status as a local plan once it has been approved at a referendum.
Yes, that's pretty clear, isn't it?
And this protocol is seeking to bring that weight post-examination, not post-referendum. Because the referendum may be a no vote.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we can just say that I mean, most of them have been approved by referendum, but some aren't. And I don't think we can just ignore that fact that we are, as far as I can see, going against the entire meaning of the original legislation.
And if the NPPF says that, then where have we got this opinion that it carries weight now?
I mean, it carries some weight as an emerging plan, but
yes, but not full material.
But not full, no.
It doesn't
we have to state that, Chairman.
I don't think we can adopt this today, certainly. I mean, I think it just doesn't make sense.
So the way I see it is, if the law is now that it has full weight after examination, that is the case whether we adopt it or not.
What's the point of the referendum?
Yeah, so, you know, if the guidance has actually made that happen, we don't need to adopt it. So I don't think we're on uncertain ground by actually saying we need to refer this back for greater clarity. Mark is saying it's only material after examination. Well, an adopted plan is a material consideration, isn't it?
Yes, but so is an emerging plan. It's just not so much of a consideration.
Not the same weight. Yeah. Gains significant weight after by send it to referendum.
It's all pretty woolly, isn't it?
But not full weight. So you know, can we confirm then that a neighbourhood plan would not have full weight under this protocol?
That would cause us considerable challenge. If that was challenged, we're on a very woolly area, aren't we?
We can't.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
We have to amend the wording.
Yes. Let me bring Mr. Fitzpatrick in.
Chairman, it does, as you go through the process, obviously it gains more weight as you go across. Once you've gone to examination, the point is simply that it is it then it comes back to committee and then it's sent off to referendum. Now, I suppose the point being is that once it's gone through the examination, that is kind of it. And I suppose at that point it does take weight. It's not a case of a woolly concept. I mean, these are concepts which the planning system is well aware of, and users and developers and their solicitors often use the arguments of, well, how much weight is given to this particular document? Well, the weight depends on where we are in the process, and the deeper we are into the process, the greater the materiality that is given, or the greater the weight that is given to the materiality of that.
And I just
that at once it has gone through examination.
Ask that we adhere to some speaking order here? So, Mr. Fitzpatrick, are you finished on what you're saying?
I was just going to say my last point was, obviously once it has gone through the referendum, so you've had the examination referendum, and then it is adopted as part of the local plan. It is the document where you start from and then start considering material considerations alongside that, because obviously the law is the local plan is the document in accordance with which you make your decision, and any other material considerations. So until it has gone through referendum and is adopted, it is just a material consideration. Yeah,
I'm going to bring Councillor Mumford in because he's being very patient.
Yeah, I think I know what the problem is.
The point to make is that if it failed referendum, it has no weight.
Yeah.
Councillor Mumford, please, you might help us with this. You're good at this stuff.
I know what the problem is.
Well, we were looking at this protocol really as a temporary thing while we got the crisis going on. And I think clients will back me up here that when we've had applications in front of us and we've got an emerging local plan that has not gone to referendum, it carried next to no weight. And we've got, and the officer said this carries no weight, it's not gone to referendum, which is quite logical. But now we're saying it gains significant weight, and I'm still assuming this is temporary, when we send it to referendum. This stops parishes or plans being disadvantaged by the crisis we're in. So I think that's what we're accommodating. And whether he initially started saying that it carried full weight after the inspector's examination,
That's
which
where the
is,
problem came
that's
in.
where we've got a problem. But it should be recognised as carrying weight after that inspector's examination and said it goes forward. Previously, it has carried no weight in practical terms.
Yeah, I think you're beginning to break the issue down with some clarity, Councillor.
Can I suggest a solution?
I'll come to you in a second, but the only thing I would just throw in, I did ask the question, is this permanent or temporary? And the answer is permanent. Councillor English, before we get a final officer response.
I think we need to clarify this document because it doesn't refer to the referendum stage of the process. It's very easy to misunderstand this and assume that that by the time you get to the examination, that has full weight, when actually what we're saying there is it carries significant weight, which is what we should be saying.
Yeah.
And frankly, the protocol, although the referendum is not technically part of this protocol, it needs to be included for a full understanding, and it needs to actually say that only that you've got significant weight when you reach the end of the examination, and you've got full weight once it's the referendum. They're two different things, and they need to both be stated. Otherwise, people are going to get terminally confused.
Officers, can you confirm the rights or wrongs of that?
Yeah, just like to point out that on page 8 of the appendix, which is the protocol, there is a note that says following successful referendum, unless material considerations indicate otherwise, the neighbourhood plan becomes part of the development plan. So that's kind of the wording there.
I understand it says that, but it needs to be part of this actual document in itself, because people won't necessarily pick up on what that means. You know, we're all experienced, but the general public and certain newspapers will not necessarily understand that.
Question to officers, what is the implication of us deferring this tonight to get better clarity?
Chairman, this is Mark Edgerton. Can I just confirm whether you can hear what I'm saying?
We can now. Crystal. Yes.
My sincere apologies. Obviously, the connectivity issues caused a little bit of an issue there, and I hope my contributions via IM were helpful. Apologies. Yes, I mean, I'm content with the deferral of this item. I think that the staged process that we've seen here is a reflection, as Councillor Mumford has said, of the current issues we are having with the delay of referendums until May 2021, and a reflection on that. Yes, the protocol is intended to be permanent. It has been a number of years since we last updated the protocol, and I think in answer to your last question, Chairman, it is the case that there will be no material harm to the deferral of this item if members consider necessary. Thank you.
But why don't we just add another line in this particular section of the document saying that that it has full weight after the referendum? What's so difficult about that? Because we all know, and change the item 5 to say significant weight. Why is that so difficult?
I would have no objection with that if that was the course the committee chose. Thank you, Chairman.
Comment in the IM from our legal officer, section 70 brackets 2 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended provides that a local planning authority must have regard to a post-examination draft neighbourhood development plan so far as material to the application.
Well, that doesn't conflict with what I suggested.
No, it doesn't. No.
I'm willing to second what Clive is proposing and Mark Egerton is agreeing with.
Yeah, I think that's the way forward.
Thank you.
Right, so there is a motion then. Can we be very specific about where those words need to go?
Well, I'm adding significant before material in the black post on the post and the outcome, right? On the right-hand side of the appendix. Are you with me so far?
Are you referring to the urgent update page?
Yes.
So note post-examination draft probably becomes a material consideration.
Yeah, I'm just adding significant.
Yeah, significant consideration, but will receive full weight post
after the examination. Yeah, after the referendum. Sorry. Yeah.
Post successful referendum.
Yes, and that's totally clear.
Yeah, I'm content with that.
And as a seconder, so am I.
In which case, we'll move to the vote. Mr. O'Connell, will you assist us, please?
Certainly, Chairman. Councillor Burton?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor English?
4.
Councillor Garton?
4.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg?
4.
Councillor Mackay?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed?
4.
Councillor de Wigadeen Shepherd?
4.
That concludes the voting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Confirm the result, please.
Thank you, Chairman. That was unanimously 4.
Therefore, that motion is carried. And that concludes that item. And indeed, it concludes our meeting for this evening. I'd like to thank you all for your time and participation.
Chairman, I thought we were going to have a
no, yeah,
item
you're
17.
right. You're right. Whoa. Relay that order. Impromptu item 17. Mr. Jarman, do you want to quickly run us through this? It's for information only, members.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to say that Maidstone Council has a statutory duty to ensure that dangerous structures, such as walls, for instance, do not pose a public safety risk. Therefore, our building control team now operate a 24/7 emergency call-out service, whereby building surveyors will attend to assess and control the impact of any dangerous structures. That's it.
As we said, that's for information only. I think that's
Yes.
good news. We appreciate the endeavours of you and your team to provide that service. Thank you very much, Mr. Jarman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that, if I may.
Please do.
I indicated on the IM. I just wonder, this has been brought to us at the very last moment, and why is that such an urgent update? And I mean, I welcome the decision, but is there a particular reason which prompted this 24-hour service at this urgency?
I think it's more or less a matter of courtesy that the committee are being advised of this before we, make great press releases about it.
Yeah,
correct.
Well, again, my question, has there been any particular local incident which prompted it? Or is it just something which just appeared on the agenda and it was found to be a good idea?
Well, sorry, as I said, dangerous structures or potentially dangerous structures have been an element of the building regulations as far as I can remember, and the council's always had a duty to assess dangerous structures, and if they are dangerous, to mitigate any harm, potential risk. Obviously, there's a resource equation in that this is the first time where we've had an out of hours service.
So,
right, but my question was: has there been a particular incident recently which prompted this to be initiated, the 24-hour service? I mean, did our house collapse in Maidstone recently, and because we did not attend to it, or is it just something your department has addressed and found it to be a good idea to introduce this 24-hour service?
Sorry, Councillor Gordon. It would be the latter, but it's as I said, there's a public duty there. You know, every year there are dangerous structures. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's walls, because unfortunately some walls aren't, don't have the support in sort of infrastructure, especially as the years go by. So we always get incidents year after year.
Dare I refer to, sudden potholes appearing in certain major highways affecting buildings?
Yes.
There's a classic example. And I think the point is that Mr. Jarman is introducing to us how his department are improving the availability of the service to discharge the statutory responsibility that we have.
Yeah, it's a good news story for it.
Absolutely, I welcome that. I just wondered whether there was something particularly which we should know, but obviously there isn't, and this is wonderful. And not only the holes in the ground, but flooding, for example, was another issue not too long ago.
Spread the good news far and wide, Mr. Jarman.
I also got confused. I thought he'd seen the state of my house.
That's number one on the list, Councillor Munford.
I have heard that your log pile can be considered a dangerous structure, but I don't think it was the house. Right, that does conclude that item, members. So once again, thank you to you all for your contributions and officers, and I am pleased to declare the meeting now closed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Good night.